Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for the kind messages, emails, all of the support that you've sent the show's way. I truly appreciate it, and I appreciate that you guys get so much value on this as we hit year 5, believe it or not. So thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate being able to bring this to you and be a part of your own coaching journey and your basketball journey personally. So that is my segue naturally to what our topic's going to be today, which is the idea of finding your coaching self and what it means to kind of go on this crazy journey that we call coaching and figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you really identify with as like your core values as a coach, and how you figure out what works for you on the court, what works for you off the court, and then getting to a place where you feel very confident in who you are in this profession that's ever changing and has so many variables going on with it. So that's kind of what we're going through today. And I know that a few of you have listened, have talked to me personally and sent some messages and emails and all that stuff, talking about, you know, the journey and the ups and downs and the things that you kind of are going through and in this craziness that can be this profession sometimes. So I really think this episode is going to help a lot and get you to, as a listener, to kind of think about your journey, where you've been, where you're going. And if you're just starting your journey, this will be some really cool insight with my guest to kind of share his journey and what the game of basketball has brought him on the court as a player as well as a coach. So I'm very happy to be joined by I have a lot of different experience in the basketball world. He is currently the high school women's coach at North Valleys High School, also founder of Next Level Hoops as well. Busy man out of Reno. Very happy to be joined by Coach Zach LeMay here. Coach, again, really appreciate you being able to come on here and talk to us. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great, and I just want to thank you for thinking to have me on. It's an honor to be here, and I just love, sharing the journey and, talking hoops. So this is gonna be a fun day. I'm excited.
Awesome. Really, really happy to hear that, Coach. This whole episode is kind of about your journey, and I start every episode by asking guests about, the introduction to you and your journey. So these different elements I know we're going to get to in more depth, but to kind of start with, Coach, let's kind of get through the kind of, I guess, the quick and dirty version of your basketball and coaching journey. What were the stops along the way that one led you to North Valleys, as well as get involved in the creation of Next Level Hoops?
Yeah, going through a lot of things as a player. I grew up in a special time during Reno, Nevada, where we played against some future NBA guys like Armand Johnson, Luke Babbitt. I think coaching has kind of always been in my blood. I remember at a very young age, I was really into like film, and my dad made me watch like the former older players before I could watch like current basketball. So I grew up really studying like Pete Maravich, Adrian Dantley, Bernard King, really old school guys. So
Yeah.
kind of developed a love for film and basketball at an early age. And going through a lot as a player, like coming out of middle school, I was kind of known as being maybe the next big name to come out of Northern Nevada, because I've been the same height since 8th grade. And I just kind of stopped growing. A lot of people caught up to me. So I kind of went through that phase where I didn't really experience a lot of struggles early on as a player,
Right.
And so I ended up playing at Reno High School. They had a lot of really great players there. They went on to win a state championship. But I transferred schools because I didn't really know how to handle being like a bench player. I didn't really know how to handle adversity because I'd never really gone through that. So what happened was I was getting recruited because I was playing really well at these big camps, but I wasn't really, seeing time on my high school team. So transferred high schools. The year I transferred is the year Reno won state. So I remember sitting at the top of Lawler Event Center, watching my former team win state while I was at the top, wondering what was going to happen to me next year.
Wow.
And, you know, kind of a lot of pressure. I sat out my whole junior year, didn't really have the senior year I wanted. Um, Always kind of wanted to go Division 1, kind of forced my way into Division 1, thinking that was going to be the right step, right? And
Mhm.
you know, what I learned was that I needed to go where the best situation was, you know. Like I got to Utah Valley University and I wasn't going against 18, 19-year-old freshmen. I was going up against 24-year-olds who were just getting off their Mormon mission. So grown men as a
Yeah,
freshman,
real
right?
adults, true adults, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I ended up going the JUCO route, broke my ankle 6 times in 2 years, and
Oof.
kind of got to sit mainly on the bench next to my coach, who was a former NBA player. So I got to learn a lot of really great stuff from him, just kind of observing the game that way. And I think that was kind of like my intro into coaching. I obviously stopped playing due to my ankle issues and jumped into coaching JV boys and freshman boys high school basketball. And, you know, that was difficult because I think kind of trying to find yourself as a coach, coaching under another varsity coach is really difficult because you don't want to step on toes. They
Yeah.
have a system that, you know, they usually want you to implement. And I
Right.
found myself kind of teaching philosophies and things I just didn't really believe in. And he's a great guy. He gave me a start. Like I have all the respect for him, but I
Mhm.
just never felt like I could be myself or kind of teach the things I wanted, you know. So it's probably the worst
Sure.
boys coach of all time, you know. But I actually thought I was going to be done coaching after my first 3 or 4 years coaching JV boys. I stopped coaching, and it was the year before the pandemic when I left the freshman JV boys. And during the pandemic, you know, you're going crazy. You want to get in the gym and everything. And I got a call from North Valleys High School, and it was the North Valleys varsity coach, and he asked me if I would help, you know, coach JV boys. And I initially was like, no, absolutely not. And then a little light bulb went up in my head, like, wait, do I have access to the gym? Like, can I go shoot around on weekends,
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that? And so I said, okay, I'll help out for a year, you know? And he's like, great, I got a key for you. And then it was like a week later, he said, hey, I got a key, but do you want to interview for the girls varsity job? Like that job just opened, and I had already applied to like 12 different varsity jobs around town, wasn't even close, wasn't getting jobs, and I was pretty discouraged. And I said, sure, why not? You know, I got to get a key anyway, why not? And so ended up interviewing. Interview went well, still didn't think I was going to get it, but 15 minutes after I walked out of that door, you know, I ended up the varsity girls coach, and it's been the best thing
Wow.
that's ever happened to me.
How was the thought process for you personally of going from the boys' side to the girls' side? Was it excitement, hesitation, nervousness? What was that like?
It was, you know, different. You know, for me, like I had two older sisters that won state championships. I've been exposed to really high level girls basketball my whole life, so it wasn't really necessarily a tough transition for me.
Mhm.
Like for me, I'm not going to teach basketball any different to girls than I would boys. You know, it's the same game essentially. Obviously some differences, but for me, the biggest it kind of hurdle that I had to overcome wasn't necessarily boys and girls. It was the reaction to everybody once I got the girls varsity job.
Really?
Because at North Valleys, they didn't have a very good history. Like their
Okay.
biggest tradition, I would say, was losing at the time. If you walk into the gym, you know, banners are blank. There's no numbers on the banners. And you know, I was really excited to tell everybody as I got the varsity job, but everybody ended up laughing at me. They're like, why would you want to coach at North Valleys? Like, if you want to get out of coaching, you're going to the right place. You know, like I heard
Mhm.
that so many times. And so for me, it was more of like, oh, what am I jumping into? You know, and I'll never forget kind of that first coaches meeting that I had. Nobody showed up. You know, I didn't have
Really?
one person show up, and everybody's telling me like, you're not going to get the buy-in, you're not going to get the athletes, you'll be lucky to fill a freshman JV team. All I heard it all, you know. And first open gym, two girls show up, and it was just one of those things where it's just, you know, I had to really build. And I think it was just that moment where I'm like, this is not going to be an easy process, you know. So
Yeah.
I knew I needed help, And so I just had to seek out the best coaches I could find, best assistant coaches. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the legendary coach Pete Newell, but
Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
yeah, so I got his grandson working with me. He was my JV
Wow.
coach, and another coach named John Metzger had ties to the feeder schools to kind of get girls interested in the program. And they're the backbone. Like I want to say that, like, this was me, but it wasn't. It was completely a program effort. So I think that's the biggest hurdle, not boys to girls, but more so of just where the program was at. But I think to answer your question, like with the boys, they're a lot more one-on-one oriented, whereas the girls are a lot more team oriented and they want to be a part of something special. And I think that's just more my style. I think I'm more of
Mhm.
a women's coach than I'm a men's coach for sure.
That's you talk about the beginnings of having those open gyms or those meetings and how many showed up, and as I'm sure we'll allude to earlier, kind of where it is that your program is now. That's truly incredible to kind of think back. I'm sure it is from where it is that you started to the excitement and the momentum it is that you have now. That's awesome. Um, I wanted to ask Coach, as something that I also know that you're passionate about before we kind of really dive into this idea of finding your coaching self is the importance of the off season. And I think this is a kind of an interesting question to ask because this is kind of coming up this episode, at least during the off season, kind of coming off the heels of summer and everything. So I wanted to ask you about what is what are your goals? How do you kind of define success for the off season? What are your priorities? What is the importance of it? And kind of talk us through what the off season really means for you as a coach in your program.
Yeah, I mean, the off season is everything. You become a better player in the off season, not during season.
Hmm.
And for me, the proof is in the pudding because my first year coaching in North Valleys, they were coming off a 5-win season, and we went in and had a 7-win season my first year without any off season. We couldn't get the ball across half court. I mean, we were losing every game by 60 essentially,
Yeah.
and the 7 wins that we had, like they weren't really feel good wins. They were kind of the wins that you schedule to make sure that you get wins,
Right, right. Yeah.
And so I mean, it was a really hard season. And after that season, we kind of sat everybody down and we said, look, like if you guys want to be a winning team, if you guys want to, experience something special, like you're going to have to give us a full off season, and we promise you, like you'll see results. And so I started this off-season program, and it basically our season ends mid-February. We started first week of April, went all the way through October. And I mean, we had practice 3 days a week and then conditioning the other two. We had tournaments almost every weekend. We're doing summer leagues. I mean, we essentially played an NBA schedule. We played about 90 games in the off season, and everything was optional, because we don't want to wear them out. Like we really preach rest and, a
Mhm.
reset but the gym's open year round whenever they want it. And one of the things that we also incorporated was there's a place called Kind Performance, and they kind of what they do is they evaluate athletes, put them through all these trainings and things, and they do all these testing. And so what they did was they came in and they tested all of our athletes with like strength training, muscle training,
Mm.
and they have these charts of what it shows what muscles are weak, what muscles are strong, and kind of what areas to focus on to prevent injury. And so that's been a huge part of our off season too, is just kind of building athletes and strength training and conditioning and recovery. So that's been a huge game changer. But with that off season, I've also reached out to a lot of former players. Like I had Marbury, Marcus Banks, and a guy named Ronald Roberts Jr., Ashley Orndorff. A lot of these former pros and great players do individual training with our players on the side. And so they're getting, one-on-one or small group lessons with pros essentially in the off season. And, those kinds of things are just so valuable.
Oh yeah.
Like this,
Yeah. That's an
yeah,
invaluable experience. That's awesome.
yeah. And
Absolutely.
so with that, that following year, we basically had one of the most remarkable turnarounds in Northern Nevada history. We won 21 games. I think we were 21-4 that year. We won our league championship. So we essentially went from being one of the 10 worst teams in the state to, being a league championship team
Hmm.
in one year, returning the same team essentially. So the off season's huge, and I think just keeping kids in the gym year round is really important. You can't not touch a basketball for 6 months and expect results the following year.
Yeah, one of the things I took from your answer, and I think that it's kind of regardless of what area you're in, is, and this is something I always like give praise to the basketball community in particular. Well, it's the only community I'm very familiar with, but I know I can speak to it because I'm entrenched in the basketball community. Is how willing people are to help and give their time and give their expertise and give their knowledge. And as you mentioned about in your experience, for to have your players work with actual, former professionals is great. And I think that even for coaches who may not be in an area where those type of players aren't necessarily accessible, there's people out there. There's coaches out there, collegiate coaches, local coaches, or players, or former high level players that exist. And in my experience, there's just so much available out there that as a coach, if you start digging and you start researching and you start looking, it will amaze you how many people there are out there who are out there in the community who are willing to help and like willing to share their knowledge. It to me, it's truly incredible, and it's something I love about being a part of this community.
Yeah, and credit to our girls for showing up
Oh
too. I
yeah,
mean, it's so hard to get, teenage girls to buy in to something
yeah.
so crazy after such a horrific season,
Hmm.
and it with the buy-in ever since that year has been incredible. And to kind of go back when I said that everybody kind of laughed at me and saying I wouldn't get the buy-in, like that was just such a special thing because people couldn't be more wrong about North Valleys. Like we truly do have the
Yeah.
best kids. We got the best staff. We have the best admin. Like it's such a special place to be. It really is a hidden gem. And like I said, it's just the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, and total awesome feeling to, go from what you said, those couple of people showing up to an open gym, to now you have all these people willing to put in the work in the summer. Like it's such a cool experience. That's great, and that's awesome. And I think for those listening, it's kind of a cool thing to think that, like, no matter where it is that you're currently at when you're taking over a program, or where you're starting with a program, you could literally start from the figurative bottom and then still make significant strides. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
And one thing I'd like to add about our
Yeah.
off season, because we do it a little bit differently than most people. I think in
Hmm.
summer ball, you see some of these varsity teams that carry like 12 players to a team in a summer league.
Hmm.
We don't do it that way. We run 4 teams of 6 or 7, 8 at the very most, all summer long. So we'll run 2 or 3 different varsity teams with very small rosters just to make
Okay.
sure everyone's getting time and
Getting
getting
reps.
reps. And
Yeah.
that's and we mix up teams, so it's like not everyone's always on the same team and just kind of shuffle them around. So they're learning how to play and learning how to
Hmm.
play with other people. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of, carrying 12 or 15 to a summer team. I'm like, this is about getting better and about getting reps. I'm not trying to be the best summer team. I'm trying to be, the best in-season team. So
Yeah.
that's one thing we do a little bit different. It's part of our conditioning is just playing 35 minutes a night,
Well, and
everybody. So
and I imagine that helps a lot with buy-in, because players know that, like, oh, I'm not just going to be the 11 for 12 person on the bench in the summer. Like, why am I spending all this time in the summer being here and I'm barely even playing? Like, they know that, like, they're going to be getting a lot of reps and a lot of good experience, and so that I'm sure helps with the excitement, the buy-in, and what you get out of them in the summer.
absolutely. Yeah.
So in this process of finding your coaching self, and I'll ask you, the Coach LeMay that I'm talking to right now, who is this coach compared to the Coach LeMay that first started? What has always been there? What has maintained and stayed the same? And what has changed or evolved to make you who it is that you currently are right now as a coach?
Um, I think the one thing that I've always had is that I've been through every type of scenario as a player that you could think of. Like I've been that player that we talked about where I was hyped up coming out of middle school, where I was supposed to be, the next big thing essentially, and it didn't happen, right? So I've been kind of on, the top, but I've also
Hmm.
been a team captain. I've been the sixth man. I've been a bench player. I've been a high school transfer. So I know it's like transferring schools. I've been injured for essentially 2 full years. So I understand how to keep people involved when they're injured. So there's really not a situation that I'm unfamiliar with as far as, 1 through 15 or 1 through 12, however many you carry on a team. So I'm very self-aware of my bench. Like the bench is the most important thing throughout the season, in my opinion, just because of their energy. Like you got to push the starters, and um, they're extremely valuable. So I always try to spend just as much time and focus on, the 12th man compared to, our starting five.
Mm,
That hasn't changed. But I think what has changed was when I first got into coaching, like when we talked about coaching under a varsity coach, you're kind of not being yourself. Like I found myself coaching and teaching philosophies I didn't necessarily believe in. I think I tried to be a little bit more of a hard ass, feeling pressure to,
sure.
win for whatever reason when those levels should be developing and
Yeah.
the experience. So I think what I've learned and what the girls have really taught me is to just be myself, and they have really showed me that kids aren't stupid. Like they're gonna read through exactly who you are. And so one thing with the girls, I've always been myself. I've always not tried to be somebody that I'm not, and I think that's why we've had the success and the buy-in that we've had. Is that I'm like they can feel that I'm genuine about what I'm doing, and they can feel that I do care about
Mhm.
one through however many we have. And I think that's been my biggest thing. As far as finding myself is just being myself, and I
Yeah.
think I've found it very easy to coach when you're just being yourself and not trying to be somebody that you're not.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that I think takes time, like you mentioned, right? Like I think at the beginning, at least I'm thinking of like my own coaching journey, like thinking that like I had to put on an air of something or I had to, try and act a certain way or be a certain way because I was kind of young and maybe a little bit of like insecure who I was. And it's to me that's exhausting. That takes a lot of energy to try and be someone else. And I think it took a few years, I know for me personally, to be like, all right, like I got to drop all this. Like, this is who I am. This is my personality. I know this is my coaching style. This coach may be really successful doing it this way, and they're, have this, that, or whatever. But like, I can't be that. And if I try to be, it's going to look really foolish and it's going to be super fake. So focus on what I am and who I am as a person. And the players will know, like, okay, like you mentioned, right? That's the authentic me. And plus, I feel a lot better because I just know I'm being myself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I find myself enjoying it a lot more too. I
Oh,
find
I'm sure.
myself,
Yeah.
just kind of getting myself in situations that I don't really necessarily want to be in games. I'm trying to be somebody I'm not, or running an offense I don't want to do, or
Yeah, sure.
all those things. So it's been a lot easier with the girls for sure.
I'm gonna pivot to something that you talked about your playing journey, because this is something that I wanted to touch on because you have experience on this as a player, and I know that it's difficult for us as coaches to, of course, have players who get hurt and who get injured, especially significant injuries like ones that you talked about, and so. I wanted to ask you about what should coaches be aware of? What should they know? What should they be mindful of when their players are going through real serious injuries like the ones that you've been through? What should a coach know that, hey, this is probably what's going on with your player. This is something you might want to think about with that player who is injured. What advice would you give to coaches who inevitably are unfortunately going to have to face that reality?
Well, I think there's a couple things from like a personal relationship standpoint,
Hmm.
be in communication, like know what's going on, know when they have doctor's appointments, know what the doctors are saying. Like, for me, when I broke my ankle in college, there was really none of that. It was more of we got to get you back on the court as fast as we possibly can. And that's just the last thing that you should be thinking, like I was rushed back. I re-broke my ankle my second practice back because I was just really trying to get back on the court.
Pressured into
There,
it, yeah.
yeah, there was zero, easing into it, and then the second time was a little bit better. They had me in the pool doing agility work every day, riding the bike, but it was kind of the same thing. I came back probably a month too early, broke my ankle again a
Hmm.
couple weeks later, and it just got to a point where it's like, am I just never going to be healthy? And like looking back, there just wasn't the proper steps in order to get me healthy. Like I should have gone through a whole rehab type situation, really trying to, strength train, build my stamina back up, a lot of different things. But instead, I was just fed right back to the wolves in practice, doing full court contact drills, practice one,
Rushed out there, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that coaches need to be very aware of is just, this is beyond the winning. Like you got to keep players healthy and you got to, really care about their health first and foremost. And from the other standpoint, don't just forget about them, like make them do something on the side to keep them engaged in practice. Like for me, I kind of kept just asking, like, can I do something? Like, can I help? Like, can I sit next to you? Can I, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, just be
anytime,
involved, be a part of the team.
yeah. So anytime I have an injured player, I might have them run people through drills, if they're able to, or they're keeping stats or, marking down field goal percentages in practice or, starting the clock for us, kind of doing manager work or, just asking them questions. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And kind of
Mm-hmm.
make them start thinking like the mind of a coach to keep them engaged, and I've noticed that that's just kept injured players having a lot more fun with our season and a lot more, excited and eager to come back, but keeping them engaged and making them feel a part of the team is the biggest thing because they can still bring you energy on the bench. They can still cheer. They can still, be very engaged. They can still, grab a whiteboard, draw some things up on the side. Like, so I try to utilize them as like some, almost like a graduate assistant in a way
Yeah.
when we have those injured players.
It's to keep them involved, I think it's super important to ask questions. It's super important because it's one thing for coaches to talk about how much, that you care about your players and you try to build this family and everything, but then if a player gets hurt and you just ignore them or forget about them, then like it's almost like, oh, I don't care about you because you're not playing, so you're of no value to me. Like all that messaging, I think completely goes away because
Oh
then it's
yeah.
kind of obvious, right? Like, oh, you just are using me for as a player, and if I can't play for you, then you don't see any value in me as a person and you're just going to ignore me and disregard me or try to rush me back as quickly as possible, potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like I always had coaches. My JV coach was phenomenal when I was a freshman, but I've always had a lot of coaches that were so caught up in the winning and so caught up in,
Yeah.
winning the state championship or whatever. Whereas I want everybody to enjoy the journey. I want everybody to really appreciate where they started and where they're finishing and like have fun and because this is bigger than basketball at the end of the day.
Mm,
Like this starts off the court. This starts in the classroom. Like, what kind of student are you? What kind of person in the community are you? What kind of teammate are you? This like for me, it's so much beyond basketball that having that experience on the bench, even when you're injured, like I still want you to have a great experience. I want this to still be the best season of your life. So I think that's just where a lot of, especially high school coaches, fall into the trap of losing sight of what's really important.
yeah, I like that. I like that comparison that you made about like a graduate assistant. It's almost like can you mention it's like, okay, I don't have you as a player, but it's like I've kind of maybe I've gained a coach or something, or I've gained something, right? There's something I still have you for, keep you involved in the program, and I think what's really cool about that too is like it allows you to kind of build a kind of a different relationship with that player at practice where they're kind of being used to do something a little bit different and they can almost look at the game a little bit different because they're removed from it and now they're kind of observing it and seeing things kind of from a further out perspective that like their maybe even their understanding or their ability to kind of understand like kind of the ins and outs of the game is changes, and it's an opportunity that they wouldn't have like obviously if they weren't injured, so it's kind of a way to try and maximize that and give them something they can still like keep learning and doing even if they are hurt.
Yeah, or for example, our starting point guard, she led the whole state of Nevada in assists per game and
Hmm.
total assists last year. She
Awesome.
was injured most of the summer, and she still came to all the games. She sat on the bench because she's a great teammate, and so I would go sit next to her at times during the game and just kind of be like, "Did you see this? Did you see that? Like, we need to execute this when you're back this way, or like this is somebody to watch the way that they're dribbling,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. Just keep them engaged, keep them thinking, and keep them keep their mind fresh even when they're not able to be out there competing,
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. For your journey, coach, in terms of finding what mattered to you, X's and O's wise. I know you mentioned and alluded to earlier how when in assistant roles, like you kind of have to run what the varsity coach is, regardless if it is your core belief on how you would like to run a team. What is your process like of figuring out the play style and the way that you like to run things? Was it something that you've always kind of felt and are still running this day? Was there a process of figuring out what worked for you in terms of what you like to run on the court? Talk us through that.
So I'm gonna have a very different answer than what you're probably ever gonna hear, I
I
think.
love it.
But when you watch some of these coaches have been coaching 15, 20 years, a lot of them go through, 3 years of having a really good team, but then they might go through a wave of 5 more years of a not so great team, then another
Yeah,
couple years, it comes in waves. And it's because
sure.
they run the same thing, they run the same system. And I still see it today where guys that were coaching against me when I was in high school, they're still running that same flex, or whatever it is. And, you
Yeah,
know, for me, I don't have a system that I love. There's not a system or a play that I trust. Like I trust my players. And when I went, like I said, I had that point guard and that year one, she was our center. And I saw her passing ability very early on. I'm like, she has to be point guard. And everybody's like, you're crazy. She's not going to be the point guard. She's the tallest player on the team. Like, she's our point guard next year. And so not being afraid to try different things, I think is really important. But we spent a whole summer developing her into a point guard. And sure enough, she's leading the state in assists per game and total assists. And I told her, I'm like, we're not going to run an offense. Like the offense is your instincts. Like I trust you. Like we're going to run a 5 out or a 4 out, 1 in, and we're gonna go off you. And it's not just her either. Like it's the other four on the court too. Like we essentially start 5 guards, and
okay.
throughout the whole summer, it's kind of a read and react. And we just told them like your instincts and what you feel out on the court is going to be better than any play that I draw up. It's going to be better than any set that we run. And sure, we have quick hitters for when we need to be, slowing down a little bit and be a little bit more organized. But for the most part, like we we get it and go, and we move the ball, we cut, we screen. But there really is no this player go to this spot, this player
Mhm.
set a screen here. There's none of that because I feel like, especially in high school basketball, you need to learn how to play. Like I don't want to teach kids plays, I want to teach them how to play.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
everybody has such a great feel for the game now, from when they started. Before, like they didn't even know what the sideline or the block was, and now they're out there, doing back cuts, flare cuts, screens, pin downs, all these things. And, we're not even telling them to do it. So, I got lucky with kids that, give us everything that they have and want to learn and ask great questions. And they've learned how to be great basketball players. And so I'm sure that's going to change. I might run into a group where we need a little bit more structure. But right now I have, a point guard that reads the floor great. I have a player who just won player of the year that hustles every play, rim runs hard, and is a phenomenal athlete. And we have a couple other second teamers that are great athletes and really smart players and know where to be. And so I don't want to hold them back one
Yeah.
bit by making them run a flex or running a certain offense. I just want them to get it and go. And here's your canvas, 5 out. Here's your canvas. Go be artists. That's what we tell them. And for us, it's worked out pretty good. So.
So with that, because I think that's great, I love the idea of like players having that amount of freedom. I think their ability to understand the game grows, their ability to, not be robotic. I've mentioned that with many guests before, talking about like not being pigeonholed to one particular like cut or move that they make and being able to kind of see what's happening and be able to make decisions off that. I think that's phenomenal. And I know that one of the uh, opportunities that comes with that. One of the things that's kind of a must with that is making sure that your players are always learning and are able to figure out why something worked or why something didn't work, and whether that's through conversations with you or conversations that maybe take place after film. And so I did kind of want to pick your brain on that process of your players being able to learn from practices and games, and how what's that process like of kind of getting them better with that decision making process and that basketball IQ process. What is that like?
Uh, do you mean like what do we do in practice to make them understand where to be, like how to play, that kind of thing?
Right, to improve their decision, kind of
Yeah,
see. Yeah, yeah.
for us, our practices are grueling. I think any of them would tell you how difficult and hard our
Hmm.
practices are, but we don't waste time with line drills. Like we don't waste time with any of that. Like we time everything. So everything that we do is timed. Even water breaks are timed. We got a clock. I got a manager. It's like set the clock for this amount of time. hit this amount of shots, hit this amount of full court layups, get this many full court turns in this amount of time, and if you don't, like, we didn't reach our goal, and it's made us play so fast, think fast, but not give us any time to sit there and gloat or worry about mistakes, and so it's made us very well conditioned, because we do a full court man to man. And I love that because there's really not a press break for a full court man. So we just kind of wear teams out on defense. And so I guess to go back to answer your question,
Mm-hmm.
our offense is our defense. It's layups
Sure.
for us,
Yeah.
and but we really try to just teach great footwork and really solid full court defense at all times, and just time everything to where everything's a competition. Even like being first one back from water break is a competition. Like our philosophy is kind of from when we had the losing season, ever since it was win at everything, win at practice, and you'll start winning at games. Win at these drills, you'll start seeing it in the games. And so that mindset has really helped us a lot. And I'm not the type of coach that really pulls players out when they make one or two mistakes right away.
Sure.
Like I kind of let them feel their mistakes, especially in the summer. I've had girls ask me to come out because they can't stop turning it over. I'm like, no, you're going to make a good entry pass before I take you out, and so
Yeah.
it's I think that's what's helped them learn to play is feeling their mistakes, learning from their mistakes, practicing fast, and it's I think it's helped them slow the game down from them practicing at such a high speed.
Yeah, because I mean, the from what it is that you describe, everything is super competitive, and everything is there's so much that's happening that like you have to, get up to speed. You're playing it a certain way because you're practicing a certain way, and so that one translates to another, and that way there's no like difference necessarily in terms of like practice and play in terms of the way that the energy is supposed to be, or the way that like the competitiveness is supposed to be. It's kind of like one, like this is how we practice, and exactly like this is exactly how it's going to translate to you playing. It's like a seamless transition, it seems.
Yeah, and I mean we practice really everything. Like as silly as it
Hmm.
sounds, we practice celebrating. Like we
I
tell
mean, if it
everybody
matters, yeah, if you practice it, if it matters to you.
Yeah, like one of the things we preach is celebrate other success. Like if we, make a layup or, cheer, everybody needs to be cheering. And so everybody's on the side, it's loud, it's
Yeah.
fun. But we also kind of make you not want to make mistakes. So we have jump ropes on the sideline. I got 12 jump ropes lined up on the sideline when we're doing like full court layups. And if you miss a layup, you're 1 minute on the jump ropes, or 30 seconds on the jump ropes, whatever it is. And so nobody wants to go to the jump ropes, so it's really kind of helped limit mistakes, I think, for us
Yeah.
to kind of add that little spice in there.
That's fantastic. No, I really like that. I mean, it's I imagine your practices are probably very busy, very loud, very active, a lot happening. I'm sure it's a high energy environment. I can kind of picture it in my head, everything that's kind of going on at once.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
it's high energy, and I know it sounds grueling, but the girls seem to love it, and I think
Keeps
especially
them
when you see
engaged.
results, and when season starts, we obviously don't, wear them out like that, but that's definitely how the first couple weeks go, get them back in
Yeah.
shape, and we also give them some rest. We watch a lot of film, things like that
Yeah.
too, so.
Yeah, I mean, film super helpful. I'm imagining for players to see like what works and what doesn't, and kind of grow their own decision making process so that they can improve for the next time. I have to imagine film is probably super important. So they, oh, this is why this works, or this is why I shouldn't have done that in that particular situation.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
As coaches, especially people who've been in this for any length of time, I think we all have our like moments where we're challenged or adversity hits us, and those events can either solidify what we believe in as coaches, or maybe fundamentally kind of change our thinking or change our thought process, and maybe kind of put us on a different wavelength or a different thinking path as a coach. And so I wanted to ask you about what are those moments where um, you've faced difficulties or adversity or been challenged in some way, and did those moments solidify, or did those moments kind of change maybe a little bit your coaching identity?
Oh man, you want to talk about challenges? I went through a lot of challenges that year one.
Okay, yeah,
Like,
love to get into that.
yeah, like I'll never forget the first open gym that we really did have where we had numbers. It
Mm-hmm.
was really the first practice, and when I told you we couldn't get the ball across half court, I'm not even
Yeah.
exaggerating. Like we literally could not dribble the ball without dribbling off our foot, without slapping it. Telling girls to get to the sideline, they're like, "What's the sideline?" Or telling girls to run to the block, "What's the block?" Like we did not have an elementary clue of even the rules. Like I had girls ask, what way are we going? Or what way is
Mm-hmm.
defense going? Things like that. And so I remember that first practice, basketballs were just going everywhere, and I remember I just kind of had that moment during a water break where I walked out of practice and I was just like, shoot, is everyone right? Am I in over my head? Like, am I the right guy for this job? Like, it just kind of, you had that moment, and so I remember I walked back into that gym. We are doing this really basic passing drill, really
Mm-hmm.
basic, and you know, balls were going everywhere, turnover city. And but I also saw how hard they're working at this drill and how like angry, but in a good angry, like a competitive angry when they would mess up or when they'd make a mistake. And I'm just kind of looking around the gym like these girls are giving me everything they got, like in this. I'm like, so I know it looks horrible right now. I'm like, but we got something, And so that moment really kind of made me like it challenged me, but that moment
Yeah.
itself made me understand like there's definitely a competitive fire in there, and we're going to take this one day at a time, one drill at a time, one practice at a time, and we're going to build something special. Like I truly believe that, and I had the best coaching staff in the world to do that. From John Metzger being such a fun like active coach with the girls, and then having Pete Newell, grandson, legendary coach Pete Newell, showing all the
Mm-hmm.
footwork stuff, like it was just such an incredible thing to see all these girls develop into actual basketball players in essentially less than a year, And so those challenges were hard. And even that first year, like we're still losing games by 60, but you could kind of see the wheels turning. Like they're starting to understand the rules. They're starting to
Right.
understand where to be on the court. They're starting to understand how to, certain, movements or plays to make. And
Yeah.
we
Little bits of growth there. Yeah.
definitely some growth. And so I'll never forget we somehow snuck into playoffs that year. And this was another challenging moment that I did learn. But we went on a 3-game win streak right at the end, snuck into the very last spot for playoffs, and we played the state championship team, and they beat us by it was 69-12. That was the final score. And I
Yeah.
remember the second quarter we were down 40, and our girls looked defeated. I called a timeout and I said, look, like, don't worry about the score. Don't play the score, play the possession. Like, we weren't expected to be here anyway. Like, just enjoy the moment. Enjoy that you're here. Enjoy the hard work that got you here. Look around you. There's all these people here. You're in a big stadium playing in a playoff game. Who would have thought, And I
Mm-hmm.
remember after that timeout, I was like, man, I hope that worked. And one of the referees came up to me. He's like, that was a pretty special timeout. He's like, I'm really glad I got to hear that. He's like, you guys are going to be all right. And I think in that moment, I just kind of learned that it was bigger than basketball, and
Yeah.
like other people kind of felt that too and recognized that too. And it made me feel good about where we were going. And, after that game, I had so many girls say how much that timeout meant to them and how much they want to be committed in the summer. And I think it was that moment where they all kind of, bought in, like, these coaches actually care about us. Like these coaches actually like want to be here. Like, and I think that was the moment where they started to give us everything that they had too. So, it's so much about relationships. It's so much about the journey. It's so much about how you treat your players. And that
Yeah.
was kind of the moment that made me realize that, I think.
And one of the things I can tell from your answer is that, despite whatever the difficulties were, and despite, how tough some of the games were, or some of their lack of maybe basketball and fundamental knowledge, it seems like the one thing you never lost sight of was how hard they worked. And like that seemed to be something that like you were always aware of, and it was something that you could always kind of tie yourself to and say, no matter where it is that they are in terms of their skill, or no matter what the scoreboard says, I know that, this group is giving me everything that they have. And I know that if they continue to do that, this is where I know we can go. And I think to kind of have something like that and know and see those like positives and see those things that they're doing and have that be something that's like, I know there's all these other things that maybe 9 out of these 10 things aren't great, but this, this work ethic is there. And that's something that like I can use, and we can take that and go really, really far in the future. And it seems like that was something that you always like kind of took from that and were always aware of when you first started.
Oh yeah, no, those girls are my superheroes, man. Like, I mean, they're
Yeah.
truly my superheroes because, I mean, we were getting laughed at off the floor every single night, every single night. And that
Yeah.
following year to go back and beat those same teams by 40 with the same team, go
Yeah. Same
win,
girls. It's pretty much,
yeah,
yeah.
get back-to-back league champions. Like there's no league championships without those girls. I don't have two coach of the years without those girls. Like you know what I mean? So it's like
Mhm.
they're truly my superheroes. And like I kind of lost my love for basketball after my playing career and even coaching boys. They definitely gave me my
Brought
love
it
back
back.
to basketball.
Yeah.
It was that group. So I owe everything to those girls. They're my superheroes.
No, no, how awesome. I mean, that's great. And so with that, is kind of ties into this idea of relationship building. I definitely want to make sure I ask about, players every year are a little bit different. You get new players come in, and the dynamics are a little bit different, and the interactions that you're going to have with a team, and the chemistry, if that's a word that you like to use, is always just slightly different year to year. You've been around a while. You've been coaching a while. As your philosophy in terms of how to build relationships and interact with players, has that changed throughout the years? Has it been relatively consistent? What would you say has been kind of your process of building strong relationships with the players on your team?
I think it comes back to what we talked about earlier, where it's, just being yourself. I think that there's a lot of coaches that, try to, which isn't totally wrong, but to find ways
Hmm.
to interact with their players, but by, maybe acting or pretending that you're, into something that you're not, and for me, like, I'm just not that way. I'm just very much myself. I speak my mind. I think any of my players will tell you that. Like we talk trash to them a lot of times, we give them a hard time about things, in a loving manner. We never demean them by any means, but I think just being myself has really helped me develop those relationships. And
Hmm.
there's so many girls that don't like, for example, don't understand the recruiting process, and so for I try to put myself out there. I make them highlight tapes. I'm like, hey, where do you want to go? Like, do you want to play college basketball? And like some of them are like, I don't think I can. I'm like, you absolutely can. Like, there's
Yeah.
a player for anybody who wants to go play college basketball. Like I know that. And so I think just showing that you care and showing that like, you want to see them succeed, beyond the season or beyond North Valleys. I think that's kind of helped build the relationships too, kind of build the trust, but also like just listening to your players, like listening to what they need. Like if I see a player struggling, I just kind of pull them aside, like, hey, like, what do you need from me? Like, how do I make this easier for you? How do I make
Yeah.
this more fun for you? Like, how are things going? Like, what am I doing wrong? And I think that's another thing is just accepting when you're wrong,
Yeah.
and allowing yourself to learn from your players too. Like I've learned just as much, if not more, from my players than I have any coach I've ever had or any, better basketball DVD that I've ever watched. So I've truly learned a lot from my players. And I think just kind of always accepting that we're never done learning and accept new information, no matter where the source is coming, is a huge part of building those relationships. And I think once you have that trust and once you have that mutual respect, they're going to give you everything you have as long as you give them everything you have. But it's got to be a two-way street. You can't just expect them to go run through a wall for you if you're not doing the same thing for them. And I truly believe in that.
I think that's great. 100% agree. It's a long process, right? It's a huge investment that you are giving in time to your players, and your players are giving back in return to you. And I know it's a lot to do, right? It's a lot to do to build individual relationships with each players, and to have players, uh, you know, come up to you, and you have to be willing and have the time and be able to talk to them and have those conversations with them about stuff that's not happening on the court or stuff that's happening in their personal life. But all of that has to be there. All of it has to be genuine, because if you need them to do something for you on the basketball court, they got to know like that they can trust you, right? They got to know that you have their back and that they can go to you and that you care about them as more than just a basketball player. And it sounds like to me that's something that's like you're super passionate about, those relationships that you have with players. And I can just tell that you look at them as much more than basketball players. You look at them as the people that they actually are.
Oh no, I love them, and we I encourage them to play other sports. Like we've
Yeah.
basically made it mandatory for our varsity team to go play tennis to work on lateral
I
movement.
love
And
that. Yeah.
what's amazing is that they kind of did the same thing in tennis that they did with basketball. Like the tennis program was a little bit thin, and we sent all of our basketball players there. They actually ended up going to state, which is down in Vegas, and so I got in a car, drove down to Vegas, with one of my other coaches, and we went down to Vegas and watched them play in state, which is like an 8-hour drive from us. It's not an easy drive. And
No.
they saw us there and they're just like, "What are you guys doing here?" I'm like, "You guys aren't just our basketball players. Like, you guys are family. Like, we're here to support you. Like, I want you to win state. Like, this is amazing." And it's the first trip to Vegas I took where I wasn't like coaching and in charge of, making sure all the girls are in their hotel rooms and,
Mhm.
going to bed, things like that. So I had a great time on that trip. So it's pretty special to see. It's actually a really special thing to watch your players play another sport and compete in another sport. You actually learn a lot about them and learn a lot about their competitive nature and a lot about their movements. And it actually really helped me make them better basketball players just watching them play tennis. So it was a pretty cool experience.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because one of the things that we're planning and that we've done and that we're going to continue to do is for our girls is we do a whole big event for volleyball, where we'll have our own section for our girls basketball team, and they make a bunch of signs, and they're like the loudest ones in the gym supporting the volleyball players who are also on our basketball team. And to have the players, the volleyball girls, who like to see all of that support and see all of that, it's like, yeah, like we still care about you, like these are still your friends, they're still your teammates, even if they're not playing the sport as you right now, and your coach is still there for you and everything, and we want to see you succeed no matter what it is that you're doing. Like it's so much fun to, like you said, also see them in a different light and see them still be players and competitors and do all those things. But it's like they're I'm not coaching them directly. I can just support them and just like kind of be there for them. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun. I'd recommend any coach do that if when they have players who have multiple sports, is now go out and see them, but like make it a thing, make it an event, and have all like as many of your basketball players who are available come out and support them too. It's really fun. It's really really cool.
Yeah, there's nothing better. There's nothing better. And like I said, it's beyond basketball, and to see them, succeed in other areas, it's everything to me. It really
Yeah.
is. And it's like we got one of our players to go play junior college basketball just this last year.
Oh
And
yeah.
she was one of those that just never thought she could. And we went up and watched her, and she's starting. She's their starting, four
Yeah.
now, and going up to watch her play at such a high level, be a starter, be such a big part of that team. That was a pretty special moment too. So
How cool. That's awesome. That's fantastic. As you kind of think about the idea, right, Coach, that we're on a journey, right? We're all on our coaching journey. And we're always growing, and we're always looking for ways to get better. Like as you kind of think about, where you've been, where you are right now, and you kind of look towards what you're hoping for in the future. What do you kind of look at as maybe your vision is for yourself as you continue to grow? What are you looking for as maybe your next steps in terms of your growth as a coach? Do you have any kind of goals or objectives in mind to try and continue to grow and get better at this profession?
yeah, I've been through so much in this game, both good and bad. Like I've kind of had to experience the pain to really appreciate the joy, and for me, I want everybody to just love basketball.
Hmm.
And I want everybody to have a good experience with it. And to really, if I'm being really honest, I'm so caught up in my players right now and what their goals are that I haven't really put a whole lot of time and thought into my future goals just because we have a legit chance to maybe win a state
Yeah.
championship this year. And my focus is on that. But like at the end of the day, like I want every single one of my players that wants to go on to the next level to do that, get a great education, and become great important people in this world. That's like my
Yeah.
big goal. And if they can go do that, if they can go experience being on a team at the next level while getting a great education, that's made it all worth it for me. But I think individually, like, I would love to be at the college ranks one day. I think that's something that I would really love to do, or be a skill development type player. Like, I just love being in the gym. Like, you don't have
Mhm.
to ask me to be in the gym. Like, my players always ask me to get extra gym time. I never
Sure.
say no.
No,
And
yeah,
so
yeah. All
if
the
that
time.
yeah, if that could be my day job, being in the gym, and continue to help any way that I can,
Mhm.
then that'd be the ultimate reward for me. But right now I'm so
Awesome.
caught up in our players that's where I'm at right now.
Let me ask you before we hit our concluding segment. I wanted to just kind of ask this in the abstract here. If you were to be talking to a coach, which you might be right now, there might be somebody listening right now who's going through this. If you were to be talking to a coach, and that coach came up to you and said, Coach LeMay, like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. I don't know if I'm good at this. The team's not doing well. Like, parents maybe are a little bit upset. It's overwhelming to me. I love basketball. I love the idea of coaching, but I just don't know if this is truly for me. What do you think your conversation, or what advice would you give to that coach who might be going through that self-doubt, or that uncertainty of knowing if this is something that they're cut out to do, so to say?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was that guy. I was
Yeah.
that guy pretty much ever since I entered high school, from going from being that this is exactly what you're going to do. You're going to be this type of player. You're going to be this and that, blah, blah, blah. And then going through those things where it's like, am I the right fit to be coaching? I don't know if I can coach. I don't know. Like, it's a little bit of imposter syndrome. That's kind of
Yeah.
what we talk to our players about, is like, you don't feel like you deserve the success that you earned. Like, that's something that we've talked to them a lot about when they're going through their success. They still had those year one feelings sometimes. We're like, oh my God, we got to play this team. We're not that good. I'm like, you're a 20 win team. Like, you are that good. Like, you know what I mean? So I think I suffered a little bit of that imposter syndrome. And for a coach out there, it's, you got to be yourself, and you got to show everybody around you how much that you do love it and how much that you do care. And if you kind of show your true self and how much you do care, like, others are going to follow. Like, when other people see the work that you put in or the time that you put in, like, players and assistant coaches or whoever it is, they're going to follow your lead. They're going to learn to love it too. And maybe not everybody, but you're going to get the ones that you really need to make you successful too. And so my big thing was would be just always be yourself. Don't try to be somebody that you're not. Always stick to what you believe in, and surround yourself with people that you trust. Like, my coaching staff is everything. I'm nothing without my coaching staff. Like, I owe everything to Pete Newell. I owe everything to John Metzger, Wiley Evanson, Zach Lewis. All those people made me a better coach, and I've put so much trust in them to develop our players, or to develop relationships, or they tell me when I'm wrong. They tell me when to shut up. They tell me all those things, and I think you have to be willing to listen to get people around you that you trust, but be willing to listen, and
Yeah.
never be afraid to hand the marker to them, be like, they need a different voice right now, like you lead right now. And I think um having that mindset is crucial in the development of not just you as a coach, but your players, your team.
Yeah, that, like, your answer just resonates with me thinking, and I alluded to earlier, thinking I had to, like, have every single answer. I had to have complete control of everything, and, like, I wanted to, not have any sort of like, uncertainty about myself. And so that idea of, like, let go a bit, right? Like, it's okay, like, let your other coaches speak, let your other coaches have a voice. They have great ideas, and they have such great insights, and they can see things in a way that you can't necessarily see them. And their perspective is going to be different, and that's good. And that's so funny just to kind of hear you say that, because I'm picturing myself as I'm imagining, like, okay, no, I got to have this really good play. I got to, beating my head against the wall trying to figure something out, and then, like, have one of my assistants be like, well, what about this? And it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I never would have thought about it unless somebody else, like, had mentioned it to me.
Yeah, and I think it's also important too to trust your players, like what we talked
Hmm.
about earlier. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, my starting point guards made me look like such a smarter coach than I really
Isn't
am,
that
you
great when
know.
that happens?
Yeah, just putting trust in your players, letting them create. Sometimes they'll make you look like a genius, and so I mean, I love them too. So I think just trusting in your players and surrounding people with who you trust is only gonna it's gonna be a game changer, you know.
Yeah, as you mentioned, right, players and coaching staff, right? The people that you trust, people that have like the best interest in heart, and it's I mean that's something that's just really cool as well to kind of hear to have heard you talk about is just how much trust you have in those on your staff or those that you bring in, and just that idea of like welcoming a lot of people in your program, right? As coaches, we can tend to, if we don't really think about it, we could tend to kind of close off our program and kind of try to be, secrecy or anonymity and not let people in for whatever reason. But like you have the approach of like wanting, people, come in and work with the girls, train with the girls, and share their knowledge with them, and like ultimately that just makes your players better by having all these people there, whether they come in for a little bit or whether they're assistants for you who are just helping your girls get better. And I think that the more voices that there are and the more knowledge there is to be shared, it's only going to make your team better.
Oh yeah, and they don't want to let you down at the end of the day. So
No, no.
when you show how much you trust them, like, from our whole starting five, it's not even just our point guard. Like we had a girl that get player of the year, and it's because I trust her. I trust her to make plays. I trust her to stay in the game
Hmm.
longer than most coaches might leave her in. I'm like, are you tired? Like I'll ask, are you tired? Nope. All right. Okay, cool. Give me two more hard minutes. Or, with
Yeah.
our other players, like, are you going to make this three? If I draw this play up, are you going to make this three? Yep. Okay.
All
Go
right.
make it.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, I think you squeeze the juice out of the orange because they really don't want to let you or their teammates down.
And how important is that, right, for players to know that they can make mistakes and like they'll still be trusted to stay in the game, or like, they could talk to you and have that conversation with you about, no, coach, like I am good, or no, coach, I will hit that three, and they know they can say that, and like you're actually going to listen to them as a coach and you're actually going to take that into consideration. I think that's something that's so cool
Yeah.
for players to know, like coach has my back and coach knows if I turn the ball over here, it's not the end of the world. I can move on to the next play and just kind of put that behind me and make a better play on the defensive end, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Because I will say one more thing about that.
Sure.
My system or whatever you want to call it, I've never had a system or an offense that's made a great player, but I've had really good players make a great system,
Yeah, yeah.
And so I will never say my system or my plays are, I'm never going to stick to that. My players are what's going to make the system in the playbook.
Hey, like you said, if some players can make you look like a the Hall of Fame coach really quickly, right? Some players can do stuff that make you feel like, wow, you're a genius. You should be at every coaching clinic across the country. And it's like, oh, well, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, but all I'm gonna say is maybe I should talk to my players. Maybe my players would probably give you more insight than I will. But nah, that's awesome. I mean, this flew by, Coach. It's crazy. It's already been an hour. So much more I'm sure could have picked your brain on. I'll have to have you again on at some point. But I do want to wrap up, Coach, with a couple of questions that I do ask every guest, which is starting with the first one. And you've shared so many, so I'm hoping that you got more that you don't mind sharing. But thinking back on your coaching career or your playing career, anything in your basketball career for that matter, what is a moment from your career, another moment, if you will, that by sharing it, you think our listeners would be able to learn from?
That is a loaded question because I have so many. And, if I had to pick one, I think it would be, oh man, I think there's every moment is a learning moment, and I'm very in the moment, whether it's a practice or a game. I think you have to cherish every single moment. And because there's never a day that goes by where I don't learn something new, whether it's from a player, another coach. But if there is one moment, I think it would be the moment that we talked about, where I called the timeout when we were losing. And, I told him to
Yeah.
enjoy the moment, because at the end of the day, it is all about the journey, whether you're a player, a coach, or a parent. Like, even parents, like if you let them just a little bit in, let them kind of just a little bit, like at the end of the day, they just want to be a part of the journey, And I think just if there's any moment to a coach, it would just be make sure every single moment is your most important moment, because you never know which one of those things that your kids are going to really latch onto or remember. And for me, that timeout was like such a little thing that I didn't think was going to be a big moment, and it ended up being probably one of my favorite coaching moments.
Yeah, I mean, how cool, right? Isn't it like always the case where like those moments that like you don't really like think are going to be big or like always end up being the most the most important or the biggest moments that there are, the ones
Yeah,
that like you don't even like. I guess we as coaches can never like plan in advance. All right, this is going to be the big moment right here. This is going to be the life-changing moment that happens. It's always, a conversation or something that you do in a timeout that you look back on, like, oh, well, that was that moment, so to speak. Yeah, you can never really
right.
predict when those will be necessarily.
But as a player that I think might help younger kids, like going through what I went through as a player, just kind of not experiencing that adversity, transferring schools, ask questions. And as a
Hmm.
coach, like communicate with your players, because I didn't really have anybody communicate with me what the plan was when I was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
And, I was one of those guys that did have that potential, have a lot of potential to be great, and to not really have that communication, it did mess with me. I missed my whole junior year. And I think that when there is a lack of communication and a lack of direction, a lack of knowledge of what your role is, I think just talking to your players and letting them know what that role is. And as a player, ask questions, ask what your role is, like get some clarity. But I think just having clarity is important too. So that'd be my other thing that I would say as a player.
Awesome. Appreciate you adding that, Coach. To wrap up, Coach, I give every guest kind of what I call a 60-second soapbox. You can go over 60 seconds because I'm not going to time you, but I want to give this to you as kind of your platform to get out kind of a final message, a closing thought, a final idea, something that you would like to leave the listeners with. You can take it any direction, basketball coaching or otherwise, that you want. So without further ado or further setup, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and let you have the floor from here and take your soapbox and go from here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just always accept new information. We're never done learning, and always, think outside the box. Like I try to do things that are really unorthodox and different. Like we try to get NBA players working with our girls. We just had Ashley Orndorff, who's probably the greatest female basketball player to ever come out of Northern Nevada, do a 2-day clinic with our girls. I've had Marbury, Marcus Banks, and Ronald Roberts Jr., like all these people, throw out new information. And I kind of sit back, watch, be hands off, and just pick their brains a little bit. So I think just learning from others and allowing your players to learn from others, and also the experience, right? Like what a great experience for them. Make it a great experience for everybody. Always accept new knowledge and just accept that we're never done learning. And I think just make every moment a learning moment and a teaching moment. And I think that you'll maximize what you have as an individual and maximize what you can get out of your players and your coaching staff.
I love the idea of lifelong learners. As a teacher myself, to hear that, right? Lifelong learners, we're never done learning. There's always so much to gain from, and like you mentioned, right? There's so many people out there with so much valuable insight to share. Pick their brains. You're going to get something good out of it. So no, that's great. Coach LeMay, I really appreciate you coming on here. Like I said, I know we in some ways I think only just kind of scratched the surface of this really important topic. Love to have you on in the future, but I do super appreciate you kind of sharing a lot about your basketball journey, talking about your process and your team's process. I mean, how incredible the story of North Valley's high school and everything that they've accomplished and will accomplish in the future. So appreciate you opening up, Coach, and talking about your journey, talking about finding your coaching self and all the great stories and insights that you shared about program building, finding who you are as a coach, and so much more. I really appreciate it. And like I said, I'm super excited to follow your journey and kind of see where you go after having such great, years these past couple of years and really build into something really, really special. Really excited to see where the road kind of takes you next year and beyond, Coach. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I was honored to be on here. So thanks for thinking to have me on. I really appreciate it. Anytime you need me back, I'm always willing. So whatever you need, you just let me know. I appreciate it.
Super. Appreciate it. And thank you all so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.